but I was in the frequency that sex runs the world. The only reason why anybody does anything is because of sex. The only reason why people get a job or try to make money is so they can have access to more sex. So my view on the world was very narrow. It was only through the lens of sex, and everybody's because that was where I grew up. My dad was a stripper or a exotic dancer, and I mean, hell, I grew up. Dad would come home from a show, a bachelorette party or something like that. It'd be midnight or 1 a.m. and he'd wake the kids up, me and my two older sisters, and we'd go through the black duffel bag, pull out a thong, and move it around, and then we'd dump out all the dollar bills and the $5 bills.
Now, if you didn't catch part one of this conversation with Scott Holliday, I recommend going back and checking out part one first of all, and then coming back and watching part two. But if not, this does stand alone on its own. We really dive into the conversation about sex, what sex means to both Scott and I, and how it's shown up previously in its shadow for us, as it does for so many people. And I think sometimes just sharing these conversations in a honest and authentic way actually allows other people to have some introspection or maybe even reflect on how these things might show up for themselves. And I really appreciate Scott for his openness and authenticity in this conversation. If you want to find Scott, the link's going to be below in the description. And if you haven't yet, please press subscribe because it really helps the channel grow. All right, thank you so much. Let's get into it. What does sex mean to you?
Ooh. Sex to me is an energy exchange. It's a creation energy exchange. It is sacred. I am learning my I'm learning my relationship with sex deeper and deeper. The more experience I have, I used to give it out frivolously, um, looking for validation, whether it's for my performance or yeah, or worthiness. But the more I learn about myself and sex, the more sacred it's becoming. It's very magical. It can be my partner. I use it to alchemize um, certain traumas. So this is a really fun territory for healing. A lot of like sex is the most vulnerable space that I believe I can be in, and for most people, you're being seen fully naked. You are in a very intimate container, um, and a lot of shadows can come up. For me and my partner, that we have an opportunity to work through them and talk through them. Like, am I enough? Am I too much? Do I want too much sex? Am I good enough for you? Am I sexy enough for you? And presence is huge. Eye contact is big for me in that one. If I can't make eye contact with my partner, it means there's something that's on my mind or in my heart that I need to let out. I need to be seen. Um, Sex is sacred. It's very important to me. It keeps me grounded. I can be, I am a visionary, so I see a lot of things. I want to create things. And I can get lost in my creations if I'm not careful. But sex will ground me into this reality. Um, yeah, yeah, I think I'll end there on what sex needs to be.
Before you arrived at this point of what it means to you now, what might it have meant to you 5 or 10 years ago?
I was thinking about this the other day about my relationship to sex growing up, even in my teens. I was under the impression that uh, some part of this is true for some people, but I was in the frequency that sex runs the world. The only reason why anybody does anything is because of sex. The only reason why people get a job or try to make money is so they can have access to more sex. So my view on the world was very narrow. It was only through the lens of sex, and everybody's because that was where I grew up. My dad was he was a jack of many trades. He was a school teacher. He was a construction worker. He was a stripper or an exotic dancer. And I mean, hell, I grew up. Dad would come home from a show, a bachelorette party or something like that. It'd be midnight or 1 a.m. and he'd wake the kids up, me and my two older sisters, and we'd go through the black duffel bag, pull out a thong, and move it around, and then we'd dump out all the dollar bills and the $5 bills. We'd we'd uh, we'd sort out all the denominations. So sex was just like in your face, or it was in my face at a very young age. Um, And so my bar for sexuality is really low. It's just like, and that's why I have to be careful because not everybody's attuned to sexuality as much as I am, or as much as I am. So yeah, sex was just like everything was an ends to sex, and sex was that means. Everything was ends to a means, and that means was sex. That was my viewpoint for a long time until the past few years. I've been digging deeper. It's like, oh, there's a lot more to life and beauty and experience of it. So it's been fun. It's been a fun journey.
Yeah, it's definitely an area of my life where there's been a shadow around it previously, and I've really changed my relationship to sex. That's been something that's definitely shown up for me in my
Yeah, I'm
life.
very interested in your story. I don't know if now is an appropriate time to talk about it, but I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, sure, sure. I mean, and that's for me, part of this podcast for me is like kind of just showing up honestly, and because maybe someone's listening and they go, "Oh, I can see myself in that." So yeah, for me, I really had really, really low self-esteem kind of through my teen years, and to the point where I genuinely, hand on heart, had the belief when I was around kind of, teens, like 16, 17, thinking, I don't think I couldn't imagine or conceive having a girlfriend because I just couldn't imagine how a woman would be attracted to me. To the point where, and this is quite funny, when I was 21, I worked as a bouncer at a club on one of the Greek islands, like one of the party islands. And there would be like groups of girls going in, and they're in that like party holiday mode, and they'd go in and they'd see me and they'd be like, oh, he's good looking. And I remember feeling like kind of down because I kept thinking, wow, like, why do these girls keep making fun of me?
Wow, what a dissonance.
And I genuinely thought they were saying it to make fun because they didn't really think I was. And that was genuinely my belief to begin with. But then it kind of like it kept happening. And it was like this thing shifted. And this is where the shadow of it kind of came in. Like that year, I think I slept with like 100 women that year.
Wow, what a
And then
change.
the same and then the same again the next year. And then I got into a relationship, and then after 2 years, no, I went from one to another, but then that one ended, and then I got straight back into that same pattern of the same types of number of women that I would sleep with, and it was like this for me. It was this kind of like I could every time, especially in those first couple of years like that, where I'd been with a few people before that point, but it's like that year, this kind of like it was like a Bitcoin.
Yeah, explosion. Yeah, literally and figuratively.
Um, and so I, as a 21-year-old at that point, I was then getting the validation every time I would take a different woman home. But also, especially when I was working away, I was getting the validation from the other men that I was around that would celebrate it. And so it's like I'm getting validation from peers as like a man that was just getting with all these women. I was getting validation from the women. Then that kind of became part of my
Oh,
identity,
yes, 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 yes. I hear that. I hear
right?
that.
So it all kind of tangles and infuses. And And then one of the issues and one of the ways that would show up for me as a problem in my relationships is like, I think I've always naturally had a very high sex drive. And actually, I'm at a point in my life now where I feel actually like it's balanced and doesn't rule my life.
Yeah, oh God, I hear it. I can relate to that.
And it would it would show up as a problem in my relationships because normally I'd get into a relationship and then at the point where I mean, a lot of people might say that a healthy amount of sex, whatever that
Yeah,
means,
whatever it means.
but might be like, 3 times a week as an
Yeah.
example. But for me, I when I was single, because it was like this kind of crazy. I think back and it is like crazy. This kind of like I was quite open about how I was, but there'd be like a rotation and just different women in and out all the
Yeah.
time, and it might be sometimes sleeping with two or three different women a day, and to then go into a relationship, it would always be less sex than what I was used to as a single person.
Yes, I hear you. Okay, yeah.
And then I would think, well, this isn't good, you know. So then that would show up as problematic in my relationships. And at this point, I had no reference really for the deeper meaning of like kind of deep, almost like spiritual sexual union
Yeah.
that I've experienced now and see it in a completely different way. But that was kind of it. And also I attached not only the validation, but that was for me was a way of expressing love and feeling the most connected to the person I was with in like a romantic relationship, in a loving relationship. And then if I wasn't having the sex, it was like it was kind of affecting me in two ways. One of the ways was um, I it kind of brought up this I'm not having as much sex and I like the actual physical act of sex, but also that was one of the ways that I would feel kind of worthy and good
Totally.
enough. And it was a way that I would feel very lovingly connected. So it wasn't just sex meant one thing, it meant a
Yes.
multitude of things that's all kind of tangled, some in its light, some in its shadow. Like, I think feeling extremely lovingly connected with your partner through sex is beautiful, but feeling like I'm good enough by having sex, and if we're not having sex, it must mean I'm not good
Yeah.
enough. And that's still something that has shown up for me right the way through till recently, where now I would catch it and be like, oh, it doesn't mean that. But it's like it was so deeply ingrained. And I think a lot of our things that show up in sexuality often come from our deepest stuff. I think it often manifests through our beliefs around sexuality. So for anyone that's listening that has things going on around sexuality and shame, and I think it's good for people to know, like it's actually really common. It'll show up in different ways for different people. But that's why, I'm really happy to be kind of open and share my experiences around it, especially because if there are any men listening that kind of idealize the idea of having like a playboy lifestyle where you're sleeping with lots and lots of women, like in a way, I can look back at it and say, actually, it was fucking awesome at
Yeah.
times. I can recognize that. I mean, like within our biology as a man, like what man doesn't feel hardwired to want to experience many beautiful women?
Hmm.
But at the same time, it creates it it can also create its problems that show up in other ways, and sometimes that's feeling empty. And one of the things I realized for me is that I got very, very good at kind of having these sexual encounters. And again, when I say very good, okay, like whatever that
Whatever it
means.
means, all relative. Yeah, it's efficient for you.
and and when I look back, almost like wildly, like how quickly sometimes I would go from like starting a conversation to
In bed.
like
Yeah. Wow.
yeah, like so
You had your game locked down.
yeah, I guess. But it was like it was kind of wild, when I look back. It was um yeah, like kind of crazy really when I think about that lifestyle. Um and yeah, it can certainly, because I think as men in general do I don't know, like kind of celebrate
Yeah.
that. They
Yeah.
celebrate it.
I'm familiar with that. That similar experience. I wasn't doing that at that capacity, but I did find a lot of my identity in sexuality, and having hookups with all these different people limited the actual depth and experience of cultivating a relationship. And I experienced fear of missing out. Oh, if I commit to this person, then I'm not going to have any of these other experiences that I might love or wish I could have. Um, but I let go of that. I spoke my truth, and allows me space to experience those other women. You know, there's boundaries and things we have around it. But I hear you. With the whole finding my worthiness out of sex was a really difficult issue for me for a long time. And even in my committed partnerships, oh, we're not having sex very often. Um, but now I'm exploring new ways to have sex. We're taking some sexuality quizzes and finding out more about our archetypes. Like the erotic blueprint was really fun for us to learn about how we communicate sexually. I'm a sexual person, and I am sensual, and I have kink and energetic. My partner is very sensual and energetic. So now I know I'm more familiar with ways to operate and connect with her and to bring her into a sexual space so I can communicate with her. So that's been really helpful. A book that's been super helpful for me um, in this territory, specifically around quantity versus quality, and the polarization of the masculine and feminine expression between partners, could be gay, lesbian, hetero couples, is The Way of the Superior Man by David Data. That's been huge. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
Yeah, I think I listened to the audiobook of that about 10 years
Oh
ago, I
wow,
think.
yeah, yeah, that's a great for
And I've not
beginner.
and I've not revisited it since. So actually I'd quite like to revisit it, just from my level of consciousness and awareness now, just because I think it would be a different
I was
experience.
thinking the same thing because I listened to it before my major breakup 2.5 years ago, and I was trying to figure myself out, and I listened to it, and it sounded so confusing and like a foreign language at the time. But I believe some of it stuck in my subconscious, and then now I'm re-listening to it this past 2 weeks, and I was like, these
Mm.
concepts are so simple now. They make so much sense. So I think it's a great initiation into manhood. Like if you're like if I was in a space, or if I were to suggest to anybody who's in a space like, you know what, I'm not sure what I'm doing with my romantic relationships. I want something more. I want something deeper. I'm not getting what I want out of my love life. I highly recommend that book, The Way of the Superior Man.
Amazing. I'll put that in the description so people can find a link to that to find it as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the the thing that I was going to make a point and then I lost myself. I'll bring it back.
Yeah.
I got very quote unquote good at having these very fast um like encounters, sexual encounters. But one of the things that I learned more recently is part of the reason I also did that is because I knew I could have women. I knew I could have the charm and like have a good experience, and I would have a great time in these encounters. But I actually had a fear of it going beyond that because I didn't believe if they saw the depths of me that they'd be able to accept me. So I felt very comfortable in the fast encounters, seeing each other occasionally, either at one off or just seeing each other like here and there. But I wouldn't actually allow myself to be seen deeply. And I had the fear of if they see beyond the exterior, then they actually won't accept me if they really know who I am. And that was a thing that I really had to kind of overcome and realize how much anxiety I had around the depth of connection. And that was probably really a year ago that I really started to address that and work through that.
Oh wow. So have you experienced a partnership where you're opening more of your heart up to that person? Is this something new? Like what was there a point in which you chose, okay, I have work to do, inner work to do, to open up my heart and trust, so that I can have a deeper committed relationship?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I've had like deep committed
Okay.
relationships throughout my 20s, and um infidelity was never a thing for me. I was kind of okay like being monogamous in a relationship, but then I remember breaking up with one person. I was in a relationship for 2 years. I'd been committed. We broke up. In the 2 days following the day we broke up, I think I'd slept with three people, like new, like people that I just,
It's like holding back a dam, and the dam breaks. It's like,
yeah. And I would immediately go back to that same pattern. And the thing that I never quite understood was as the depth of the relationship would happen, especially in the first few months, as I'd start to create attachment and connection, more anxiety would come up, not less, because there was more of the fear of being seen.
yeah,
So, um, it's a fascinating thing to work through when you start to realize how and why things can show up as problems in relationship and, in these ways where it's not super obvious. And it's actually only recently I discovered the term limerence. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
no, can you say that again?
Limerence.
Limerence. No, what is it?
Yeah. It's this was really a game changer for me, is that I and here's what I believe. Most of our stories, like the love stories that we hear, the love songs that we hear, I actually think they're limerence stories and limerence songs. And it's actually a state of
Ah,
infatuation
yeah.
with intrusive thoughts and almost obsessing over someone, where when you meet them, you can actually feel this sense of, oh my God, this is incredible. This is wonderful. The future seems so much more amazing now. This person inspires me. I realize I can be so much more than what I thought I could. So it's this incredible experience, but actually it's usually rooted in some type of attachment issue
Yes.
or early trauma. And what I learned was, and this was an incredible realization for me more recently, I think my entire adult life, for me, I was actually looking for limerence and not love.
Yes. I can see that. Trauma bonds. They're so tempting. Yeah. I totally agree because that's something I chose in all my relationships. Like I just mentioned earlier about my wife, I was looking for a mother because I was looking for that limerence. I believe I'm using it correctly. I'm trying it out. I was looking for someone to fill a void in my life. I was looking for someone
Mm.
else to fill a part of me that I didn't feel whole and complete in. That's why it was so important after my last partnership that um, going forward, I was like, okay, before I go into the dating scene, before I go in looking for a romantic partner, where am I at? Am I fully expressed? Am I fully safe? Do I need anybody? No, I choose. I'm choosing other people. We've had a huge infatuation stage that lasted for like 6 months before we started like having, challenging conversations. Um, but as we started moving out of the infatuation stage and into more of the everyday uh, committed partnership, it came down to choosing the other person, even when it was difficult. That's what love meant to us. It's like no matter what, I am my word. I love myself. This is how I'm showing up to the relationship. I choose that person. I don't need that person. I can. That was another thing too about speaking my truth, being willing to surrender the relationship so that I could be whole and complete, and I could speak my desires. My our ability to choose ourselves over the relationship container actually fortifies the relationship because it gives us trust and we're fully seen, like you're talking about, moving out of that limerence stage into true love. But, yeah, yeah.
And I think there's that idea that I've heard some people say you fall in love twice, once when you first meet and then once, however, further along down the line. And I actually think it is limerence and then maybe the falling in love. And sometimes, because limerence can last for actually for years within a
Oh,
relationship.
yeah.
And normally you find it's the relationships that have the ups and the downs and the roller coasters. It's usually limerence and not love. And I think sometimes people say love versus lust. And actually, I think lust gets demonized. I think lust is an amazing thing to have in a
Oh,
relationship
yeah.
where you lust after your partner, where you have that desire for them, where you have that eros and that whoa, like yeah,
Passion.
I think that yeah, I think it gets wrongly demonized. And actually, I think when people talk about lust, I think they're actually meaning limerence. So I think it's
So
not
we
love
can,
versus love.
yeah, I'll look into that too because I can start using that. The uh, language is powerful. Language is casting spells, and I see people casting spells on them every day. So be very wise, be very conscientious of the words that you use because, oh, I had a rough life or my life is difficult, then you start believing that, start feeling that. So thank you for learning me a new word, limerence, because I can now differentiate to my clients and those around me the difference between love, lust, and limerence. That limerence part is, like I was thinking, trauma bonds, creating toxic relationships. Uh, when we grow up and we're in our parental units or however we grew up with uh, whatever we're conditioned to believe, it's conditioning our nervous system. Our nervous systems can be conditioned to feel safe in uncomfortable situations. So all the ego thinks is, am I alive or am I dead? Am I surviving or am I, threatened? And we could be in a situation where someone's being abusive to us, but we're familiar with that growing up. And our nervous system is conditioned to be in this uncomfortable space because being alive and abused is better than being dead to it. So reconditioning the nervous system has been a huge thing for me in my partnership, creating a safe space for her to express herself and vice versa. So I think limerence can be a big issue for people whose nervous systems are conditioned to be in uncomfortable situations or yeah, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And like I said, I've been really thinking about this just the last 2 days. I really think all the love songs we hear, I think they're limerence
I'm gonna think
songs.
about that. Yeah.
So I think what we find is, and a lot of these kind of like romantic movies are often more around limerence.
Yes,
And
I
I
agree.
actually think, I think are looking most people that think they're looking for love are actually looking for limerence. And it's actually wild because I think if we zoom right out, we can see that within culture, we unknowingly actually have confused love and limerence. And I think we're unknowingly trying to find limerence. That's one of the things that I discovered, that, oh, this thing that I thought had to be this crazy infatuation, all this chemistry, like all the fireworks, the roller coaster, like, oh, no, 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 that isn't love. That's limerence.
Good. Now with that description, I can start thinking even more about what does love mean to me exactly, especially with
Mm.
that mirror. I've got lust, we got limerence, and love. When I can start triangulating things with more words and new words, I can start delineating like, love is this, and then it's a very helpful tool. So thank you so much for that. It makes me think of I think about movies and culture. One of my favorite love movies is actually won a bunch of awards at the I think Oscars. You win movie awards for Oscars was
Mhm.
Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful story about what love is. Um, yeah, it's really fun and it's really hilarious. Yeah, it's very emotional. Oh my God, it's so emotional.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I've not seen
Yeah,
it. So, Liv,
Live, the lovely Live.
what does she mean to you?
She is my interdimensional love, my cosmic partner. We're two beams of light flying through the universe, checking out different planets, spending a lifetime here and there together. Uh, we like to hit different planets and see if we can find each other and create a new life experience together. She's me in so many ways, yet the opposite. So we're like two magnetized polarities circling around each other, seeing different aspects and corners of each other. Um, she's my soulmate. Uh, she's my teacher and my student. She's my lover. She explores the depths of my heart and the expansiveness of this world. She's my sacred union partner. Uh, she's everything to me, uh, yet nothing. And when I mean nothing, she can be a nobody. Whenever I need to express emotions, she won't take things personal. Uh, so there's tons of space. And I don't need her, but I choose her. And I choose her every day, every moment. There's a choice. I choose her. Uh, yeah, I could go on. She's wonderful.
What have you learned about yourself since you met Liv?
Oh, what haven't I learned, my friend? She is one tough bitch. She is. She won't let. She holds me to my greatness like I hold her. She won't let me slide, and I love her for it. And that's what exactly what I want. I want a partner who holds me to my greatness. And I've learned a lot about my intelligence. I'd questioned my intelligence when I was younger because I didn't want to go to college. I was bored at school. It just wasn't stimulating to me, and I felt I had to do it. If I wasn't college educated or something like that, I wasn't smart. I wasn't worthy. But has worked with a lot of people, especially in coaching containers, and she's taught me how wonderful, how exquisite I am. She's taught me a lot about my gene keys. I'm not sure if you're familiar with gene keys in human design, but um, uh, I'm a manifester, and I have a gene key of purity. Vanity's on the polar end of it. So if I'm in my shadow, I'm being very vain. But if I'm not, I'm being very pure. She's taught me a lot about my sexuality, a lot about my divine masculine, how to show up as a man. Oh my gosh, it's hard to come up with a specific right now because my neurons are firing about how many different things she's taught me. And I'm so grateful that I've been open to all of her feedback or feed forward. Call it feed forward, not feedback. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
And in a relationship dynamic that is as powerful as that and as connected as that, has that come with its
Oh,
challenges?
yes. Yes, absolutely. The fact that we're so present and conscious every moment together can be very taxing on our nervous system. And sometimes
Mm.
we have to like take a time out, like, hey, I need to go in the woods or spend an afternoon here or there, because we're constantly holding that standard for each other. And when we travel or do a few weeks of intense events or activities, uh, our egos can start to come to the surface because we're just tired. And we'll notice if we're treating each other in ways that are not acceptable. Um, that yeah, there can definitely be some challenges at times. But the fun part is we've realized that through like our understanding of the hermetics, the seven principles of the hermetics, and some of them being rhythm. Rhythm is a huge one because we know when we're in a dark place, and or I wouldn't really call it dark place, but it's a difficult place in our communication. We're having a difficulty connecting and being present. We know that as we hold space for each other and work through it, that the other end is beautiful. So every time we get in the swing to the left, we know that swing to the right will be, it's often just as good, if not better, than that swing to the left. So we hold space and grace for each other. I've learned so much about grace and not holding resentment in my partnership. Um, yeah, we do have challenging times, but it always is wonderful to work through them. And we don't, another thing is if we feel a disconnect or we feel something is off, we don't let it set. We address it immediately because our relationship container is where we go to clean ourselves and see ourselves clearly. Especially if we go out in the world and we're around a bunch of people and we might feel like we're getting treated certain ways or we're taking things personal, we're getting triggered. We go back to our relationship container, our safe, clean home, and 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 we remind each other who we really are, and we alchemize those triggers. We'd go. I sometimes I feel like I'd go crazy with the level of work I've done if I didn't have some place to ground me. She's an integrator and I'm a visionary, so she helps ground me. I'll throw out ideas and she'll help. Like, hey, that's something we can implement. That's something that can't. So it's a place where I find a lot of my grounding in is this relationship container. Yeah. Oof. Yeah, you start. I'll open up the questions around live. I can go.
That's beautiful,
Yeah.
man. When you mentioned there about, if you've been out other places and, you know, about how people might see you or being like, do you find that you might get judged by people's ideas of what they think you are?
Yeah. So here's a way to explain it through the hermetics. Um, everything is vibration, everything is energy, right? So I'm here at home with Liv, and our vibration is vibing high because we're often in joy and love. Now, if I go out, like I went out to Florida for 4 days to stay with those clients on my own, and their vibration was a little bit lower. So after 4 days, I raised their vibration, but they've also decreased my vibration. So, and by vibration, I mean the way they talk to each other, the way they communicate, the way they interact. So that when I came back from the trip from Florida, I was carrying some of that negative energy or that lower vibration energy into our partnership with Liv, and she didn't understand what's coming from. So then we knew to hold. So then we went through a challenging time during that. Like, why was I being sensitive? Why was I acting that way? And then we realized, oh, I carried some of that lower vibration. So I come back there, and then she helped me raise it back up, hype me up, help me like I could express myself. Oh, this is what I'm feeling, what I'm going through. So I think if or I know if I have a high vibration at home, and I go out into the world, and I get all this shit from politics or the way people are drama, the way they're treating each other, and I start feeling that, my my body starts vibing at that frequency a little bit. And I do my best to protect it because I'm like, okay, that's not my bullshit. That's not mine. What can I do? But and then when I come home, I can raise my vibration up. That's why it's very important for us to keep our home very clean, very loving. All of our friends who come over reflect that to us. Like something about the place here is just so lovely. The energy is wonderful. So yeah, it's really intentional for us. In order for us to do the work we do, we work with people who are going through the shit. We work with people who are struggling. So it's important for us to maintain a high vibe so that we can help them and not get sucked down in there. Because we won't be any
Yeah.
help if we're in the shit with them like that.
And that's amazing that you can be each other's kind of what's the word
We're
I'm
like
looking for?
lifeboat. We're like
Almost like
we're each other's tree. We're each other's anchor. That's what it feels like to me. We're tethered together, and neither one of us goes too far into negativity because we keep each other grounded. It's polarizations. We're magnetic and polarized quite well. Whenever I'm in my masculine attributes, she naturally goes to her feminine, and vice versa. So if she's doing work throughout the day and I have a light work day, I start doing, well, actually, I don't want to attribute feminine to cleaning, but I take care of household things. Or if she's, here's a better example, if she's going through a really difficult time and she's expressing her emotions, I shift, and that's a very feminine and chaotic, which is beautiful. Then I shift into the masculine and I become a nobody, in the sense of like I don't take things personal and I hold space and I'm like, please, like let me know what all you're going through. Because if I throw in my emotions while she's throwing her emotions, we have a big mess. So I shift to the masculine, and then when she feels fully expressed, then I see if there's space for me. There's often space for me to express my feminine in the emotions that I'm experiencing, and so she shifts in the masculine. So we hold space for each other as opposed to both of us being masculine and cold and here's no emotions, or us both being feminine and very expressive, where we don't know who's shit because that can get very difficult if a partnership or a couple are in an argument and both are expressing their feminine attributes or their feminine characteristics and saying all their emotions out there, then it gets confusing. Whose experience is valid? Whose is who? Yeah, that's really huge. That goes into also the way of superior man. Okay.
yeah, I guess it kind of creates like an emotional
Yeah,
tornado at that
exactly.
point.
Tornado.
Yeah, amazing. You mentioned hermetics and you've already mentioned rhythm. For the listeners that aren't familiar with hermeticism and the hermetic principles, could you give us an overview of the seven uh, principles?
Let's see. You might be familiar with them as you hear with some of them as I go over them. I'm going to go straight to the book so I don't mess anything up. But what I love about Hermeticism um, is is the story behind it. It's so fun. Hermes Trismegistus, also known as Thoth, the Atlantean. Um, if you study like Randall Carlson, he goes over history, and every I don't know 10 or 20,000 years, there's a cataclysmic event on Earth, and we lose traces of all these artifacts that happened, many years ago, other civilizations ago, eons ago. I mean, hell, if you see a dilapidated city, like I think Detroit for a while, it went dilapidated for 10 or 15 years, and all the homes, there were just trees were growing out of them. Like everything that you recognize was just disintegrating over 15, 20 years. Now imagine a civilization that was here 10,000 years ago. A lot of their things will deteriorate and go back into nature. So, anyways, every 10 or 20,000 years, there's a cataclysmic event. I call this, in the spiritual terms, a harvest. So, an expression of source through consciousness, through the human species, can take place for 10 or 15,000, 10 to 20,000 years, and they have an opportunity to reach enlightenment and go into the cosmos and potentially go to fourth density, a social memory complex, something like that. So we had the last one, the Younger Dryas effect. I don't know how many thousands of years ago. I believe that's the one that did off the Atlanteans. So
Mm.
during that time, there was a few survivors, but one of them was fortunately Hermes Trismegistus Thoth, and he brought over a lot of cultural and civilization knowledge through the Emerald Tablets. So he brought a lot of that information over to the new civilizations like South America and Africa and things like that. So I love this story about it. It's really fun sci-fi fantasy to me. But yes, some of the principles here for the Hermetics, those who follow that philosophy. What I love also about the Hermetics is that they're not out trying to change the world in like a very ostentatious way. They're not like they're just doing it. If people seek the answer's there. Uh, and I see them as like old wise men and women, or whatever sex they choose. Old wise peoples. Okay, so the first one, the principle of mentalism. Everything in the universe is from the mind. So I'll abbreviate these as best as possible. So everything we experience comes from our mind. And this goes a lot to the stories I was talking about, like the stories of the past, that the traumas and the narratives that we attach to. We attach to those stories, that's the reality that we create. The words we use to describe ourselves and our reality is the reality we create, the fears of our future. So if we can let go of those and drop those and just be in the present moment and create something from our hearts and mind, I believe it's essential to connect the thoughts with the emotions of the heart, because that is where you connect reality. Joe Dispenza talks about this as well, in like breaking the habit of being yourself and becoming supernatural. He's a great scientist and author for connecting spirituality with this actual science. So whenever you want to create your reality, whenever I want to create my reality, I connect the thoughts. Well, actually, I start from my heart space. What do I want to feel and experience? And then I create my thoughts from there and I focus on it. Yeah,
Yeah, and for people that might struggle to get their head around that, simple ways they can think about it is like how many times do they eat foods that their friends don't like or vice versa, or you watch a film that you love and someone else doesn't like it, and you're seeing the same thing on one
uh,
hand, but in the other hands you're seeing something completely differently. And that's like, it's almost like the idea that if there are nearly 8 billion people that all can perceive a universe, there are actually nearly 8 billion universes, because that universe and the perception of it exists in your minds.
exactly, exactly. And that's funny. That made me remember. I was watching Thor: Love and Thunder maybe 2 years ago when it first came out, and I didn't like the movie. This is so lame. It's so bullshit. And then I watched it. I think it was 6 months ago, and I fell in love with it. And I looked at Liv and we're like, why did we fall in love with it now? But a year or so ago, we didn't like it. And then we realized, well, we came to the conclusion that we've worked through some egoic filters, some egoic lenses that we couldn't connect with that level of love or appreciation or spirituality. And now it's just like,
Hmm.
wow, what a really amazing story. It's an amazing love story. And it's a love story. And it goes into a lot of spirituality, like it goes into the source and the one, the all. So yeah, mentalism.
And, and I think just to tie up on that, I
Yeah.
think it's good for people to understand that from that place, if everything exists in the mind, we actually really can create our reality, because the things that, the belief systems that we have, the way in which we see the world will create our experience of the world.
Oh, yeah, you're coming into another one. I might just skip to it. Oh, it is. It is the next one. It's the next one, brother. The principle of correspondence. This is the one most people will probably be familiar with. As within, so without. As above, so below. So this one essentially is, it's like a cheat code for all the other, it's like a cheat code for all the laws. Like if I want to know how fourth density works, or higher dimensions work, or lower dimensions, they work very similar. They work in the same fashion as a current dimension. What you were speaking to here, as within, so without, our inner world reflects our outer world. So if you're going through pain and turmoil inside, that's likely what that no, that is what you're creating in the outside world. So that's like the I think you see the tree of life is often connected with this principle. You see the tree of life. Yeah, that's huge. I often think about this. This is one thing. There was a time period I was always looking up to the stars in the heavens. I'm like, why can't why can't God or the angels just come down and like help us out here, and just like, we don't want this, like we don't choose this, we just want to have beautiful lives. Why don't they do that? But then I got thinking to myself, like, well, if I want them to help me, then it's imperative that I reach down and lift those up who need help, whether it's my whether it's helping raise the consciousness for my dog, or helping clients that are seeking more peace in their lives and love. So I can't always be looking to the stars. I It's imperative that I look down and or not look down, but figuratively speaking, help my man who's reaching up, to help lift him up, essentially. So that's the way I view correspondence in that term.
And and I guess to add on to that, it's realizing that God and the angels that are, as above, so below, that God and the angels that you want to come and help, actually God and those angels are within you.
Yes, yes, you're nailing it. Yes, I have I had a deep, I've had a tumultuous relationship with Christ consciousness.
Mm.
But recently I've really healed it, and he's a bro. And then he reminded me that Christ conscious, these angels, these beings are with. He's like, I'm within you, and I'm within everyone who chooses it. So yeah, I hear you. He's always with us. Okay, so there's a few more here. I'll go through them. Principle of vibration. I talked about that one earlier. Everything has a vibration. Even things that look like they're still are vibrating. If we look at the universe, there is not one thing in the universe that stays the same. If you give it a million or a billion or 10 billion years, even the sun dies out. All things change, and that's the one thing that's constant in life is change. So that brings me some peace. Now I think about it, is that I accept that not that that the things I have, I appreciate them in the moment, because I know that I'll never get the same space time back. So it makes me very grateful and appreciative of the experiences I do have, and I don't try to hold on to something and attach to things. It helps me not attach to things, whether it's my partner or my love or my home or my doggy. I know that I one day I won't have it, so I appreciate it for what it is right now. It seems very melancholy at times. It's like, oh, but I just focus on the present moment for vibration. There's a lot more things I could talk about vibration. I want to keep it brief since we're going a little bit on time. The principle of polarity. That's a really fun one. Everything is on a pole. Um, so love and hate are on a pole. This is huge for me, um, because it helps me alchemize emotions. And I haven't really described it in person, or like this out loud before. I just known it in my head. Um, like and dislike are just on. They're like a thermometer. And yeah, here's one to explain it. A thermometer. There's no hot or cold. It's all relative. So 30 degrees Fahrenheit can feel cold if you're used to 60 or 70 degrees, but it can obviously feel hot if you're used to 0 degrees. So it's all relative. Just like hate, like you can really hate this person, but man, if you think about the person, your nemesis, the person that you hate there, you just dislike them, relatively speaking. So this helps me navigate emotions when I really feel like I'm attached. Oh, I'm really upset about this. Then what I do is I take a deep breath, I take a step back, I look at that person from different perspectives, their life experiences, and mine as well. And I see it helps me gain compassion and move them on the polarity towards love. So I just think about things that are, sometimes I do this. I'm not saying this is the correct way for everybody. Sometimes I look at things that are worse or the bigger picture, and it helps me get compassion for others. So that's polarity in a nutshell from my perspective. The principle of rhythm, everything that swings to the left will swing to the right. So if you're having a negative or difficult experience, the harder you go left, you could just go just as hard right. So if I'm creating a really terrible, if I'm experiencing a really terrible experience um, in my life through a breakup, through a job, uh, I know that I have the potential to create something equally as intense on the positive spectrum. That can be a little bit challenging, I believe, to understand and realize if the majority of your life you've only experienced the pain. But I just want to give a ray of hope, a light at the end of the tunnel that this is a fact of the universe that as long as if you choose it and you're willing to work towards it, you can have beauty that's just as intense as the pain. And it helps me navigate my relationship if it because it oscillates between difficulty and beauty. Okay, principle of cause and effect. So this one is really empowering. This is a very empowering principle. If we look at cause and effect, we see, today I woke up late. Why did I wake up late? Well, my alarm went off, so I blame it on my alarm. I was like, well, who set the alarm? Or my alarm went off late. Who set the alarm? Well, I set the alarm. And if I keep going back and I say, well, I set my alarm late because I had a bad day at work, then I can keep putting the cause off back ad infinitum. Keep going on forever. So the hermetics say, hey, don't be the effect, be the cause. Um, this one I do intuitively, so actually describing it, I'm if you have any reflections on this or advice on this, I take myself out of it and I just say, hey, I'm not going to be the victim of my reality. The buck stops here. I stop the generational trauma here. I do not like being treated this way, so I'm not going to continue to treat others this way. Oh, you punched me? Well, I'm going to love you back because if I punch you back, then it's just going to be a fight. We see this a lot with or I see this a lot with our politics and our world politics, the geopolitics. So people fighting back and forth. It's like, someone's going to stop it somewhere. Quit being the goddamn effect and be a leader and be a cause. And the last one is the
I
print.
think
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I think the beautiful thing about all these principles is that they actually tie in with each other. So, for example, cause and effect. If you don't want to be the effect and you want to be the cause, actually, we can look at the principle of rhythm, of how it can swing from one, we can swing from one to the other. We can also look at polarity and see that cause and effect actually are likely to be on the same pole. So, if we understand alchemy and how to turn one from the other, even if we think right now everything in our life has happened and that we're here as an effect of it, but then we can actually switch that to becoming the cause of everything else that's to come.
Yes. Yeah, yes, exactly. There's been so many times. Yeah, I was like, these all, like, I can visualize these all working together in this beautiful way, vibration, swinging back and forth on polarity, the rhythm of it. Yeah, it's really wonderful. But sometimes it can be confused. Is this correspondence or is this rhythm? Whatever. As long as you're navigating your life, you're mastering yourself. That's what the Hermetics teaches me is the Hermetics is the teachings to master oneself, to use higher law on lower law. So if I'm experiencing a swing into the negative, then I shift myself up using a law above it, like correspondence or mentalism, to not feel the whole weight of the emotional effect. So I don't get drugged back into unconscious behavior because I'm going through something difficult. I know for me that this will pass, and I'm learning a lesson out of it. I look for the lesson when the pendulum swings to the negative. I shift up and I start looking for the lesson, and I have gratitude and appreciation for this because I know without having negative times in my life or difficult times in my life, I won't have the contrast to appreciate the beauty. I'm like, okay, ooh, I'm experiencing something really fucking difficult. okay, I'm excited for this to be over because I know that the beautiful part of it is going to taste so sweet. Yeah,
And Scott, something that you mentioned earlier was collapsing timelines. And I think this is where you mentioned about the magic. And I think actually, when we recognize that the pendulum swings, if we then actually think about collapsing timelines and we know it's going to swing the other way, we can, some people can think, I've got to wait a long time for it to swing. But if we can't do the collapsing of timelines, actually, we can hop right across almost immediately when we become aware of where the pendulum is.
exactly. I love that. Yeah, I love that perspective. Yeah, as soon as we okay, oh, I can see that I'm going this direction in this low vibration time. I'm going this direction. Then I can potentially see the polar. I can use polarity to see what it looks like on the other side. Oh, I'm having a difficult connection with my partner. The romance is really struggling right now. We're not having much intimacy. I know once we work through this, we're going to have bomb ass sex. So that I can, yeah,
For me, what would come up there, that like we're not having the intimacy. Sometimes people think like, so I think the actual, for me, what comes up in the collapsing of the timelines would be a lot of people think, what do I need to do? But being precedes doing.
doing, yeah.
So if it's who do I need to be? And if in that moment you embody, and this is the collapsing the timeline, embody the person that you need to be for the situation to change. And I think that's how we collapse the timelines.
You are nailing it. Being, I love that reminder. Thank you for that reminder. I've heard it before, and I was really utilizing it. I'm gonna utilize that again. Remind myself of being, and in stillness. Whenever I'm just being myself, and I'm in stillness, or being what I choose, what I want to be, then I get a lot of clarity. There's a lot of love and clarity there. Thank you for that reminder. Yes, just being it. Just be about it. Okay, we got the last one. Let's see, the principle of gender. Okay, so everything has masculine and feminine attribute, masculine and feminine poles. And we're not talking about like the actual sexual, what we see here in third density, where there's genitals. We're talking about like more what we talked about with David Dita's way of superior man. We're talking about masculine being the container holder, masculine being knowing and sure. He's like the divinity, the divine word of God. And then feminine is more about the void. So the void, the erratic, the beauty, the chaos beauty, the feminine, the expression. So it's important to know this one I'm not as edified on the actual teachings of it. So if you have any reflections on this, I'm open to hearing it from you as well. But for me, I've really utilized this one in my communication with my partner and my friendships. It's how do I show up if someone's expressing their feminine, their chaos energy, and I watch it, hold space for it.
Brother, I really enjoyed this conversation and thank you so much for being here. I'm going to put the links where people can find you in the description. But if you want to let people know whilst they're listening, where's the best place to find you?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, and I had so much fun talking to you. If I had a bigger breakfast, I would probably stayed longer. Okay, so they can find me. One of the best places to find me is on Instagram, and that's at Holiday Bam, HOLLIDAYBAM, and DM inquiries there, perfectly accepted. I'm pretty good about responding to that one. That's probably the best place to find me.
Brother, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And I really hope we can do this again.
Me too. It's been an honor, privilege, and blessing to be on the podcast. I can't wait to do more with you in the future. I'm really looking forward to it, Sabri. Thank you, and best wishes to you, my friend.
You too, brother. Much love.
Much love.